RadioOrNot.com and SoFloRadio.com present The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Call out the instigators, because there's something in the air. We got to get together sooner or later, because the revolution's here, and you know it's right. We have got to get it together. We have got to get it together now.
Well, happy Monday. Good morning. We are broadcasting live. It is the Nicole Sandler Show. Alas, you can tell I'm not Nicole Sandler. We are back. It's Jacob Dean here from Filter Free Radio. I hope you've gotten used to listening to us on Mondays. We do our program, Filter Free Radio, Monday evenings on Nicole Sandler's Radio or Not network. But of course, as you know by now, it is the holiday season. Nicole is filling in live for Randy Rhoads nationwide, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, randyrhoads.com. Nicole is back in for Randy Rhoads again today nationwide. And to help out Nicole a little bit, we have the awesome pleasure, the honor to be filling in for her on her morning show here at RadioOrNot.com. Also broadcasting live at SoFloRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com, our website, FilterFreeRadio.com. Folks, listen to us on YouTube, on the Stitcher app, all sorts of cool things. However you may be joining us, love to have you with us and participate in the program. You can tweet me at FilterFreeRadio. You can email me, Jacob at FilterFreeRadio.com. And you can also call in live to this program right now as we are on the air. Would love to hear from you. We'll take your phone calls. Our telephone number is scrolling across the top of your screen. But if you're not watching us, you're like, well, give out the number. It's 503-746-TALK. 503-746-TALK, TALK. Speaking of talking, I have to introduce my good talking partner here, my co-host, my kick-ass, all-around awesome brother from another mother who's live in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., a D.C. native, Beltway insider, but thinking way, way outside the box, Mr. Skeptical Scott.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hey, there he is.
Good morning.
How you doing, man?
I'm only halfway through my cup of coffee, so I'll let you know.
The first cup, by the way. That's right. Right.
No, I'm good for one a day, but yeah, I'm still a little groggy, but hey, I'm here, right?
Hey, man, I need like 2 or 3 cups this early. I do not get up this early, and so you're like, what? There's a lot of things to get into the news. Talk Radio News Service is off for the week. They get to take a little holiday vacation themselves, the hardworking folks there. So we're not going to touch base with the Talk Radio News Service. So you get to get all of your news from me this morning. Yay! News you can use if you're tired of the corporate media lies and abuse. We got some good stuff for you this morning.
Aren't you clever?
Hey! I'm I'm on my second cup of coffee. And there's so many things to talk about this morning. I really don't know where to begin. This is one of those shows where I've got way too much prep, and I know I'm not going to get to all of it, so we're just going to kind of go through things. And again, I'll mention I would love to have folks participate in the conversation. This is the day before New Year's Eve. We've got one day left in 2013, and before we, jump into 2014 and move forward, it's always good to think ahead. I wanted to take a second to kind of reflect back how I think it's very unfortunate that we never take a moment to actually reflect. We never really take a good moment to see how far we've come over the last year. What has changed? What has happened? Have we really processed everything? And what bothers me is how often we repeat the mistakes that we've made in the past. How often do we not learn from history? How often do we not take a minute to stop and reflect back on the past year? It's always a good idea. And there's all sorts of, the top Fox News bloopers from 2013, or the top, Edward Snowden revelations from 2013. There are all sorts of top 10 lists or whatever. If you want to call in with your, most memorable moment of the year, if you want to call in with what excited you most about 2013, if you want to call in about how you have progressed yourself over the last year, that's actually what I want to talk about for a minute. Call in. We'd love to hear from you. I've also got I do have one top 10 list thing of 2013 that I want to read a little bit from. It's actually the top 10 good things that we should reflect on in 2013. It was a great article by Medea Benjamin at codepink.org. We'll talk about that in a minute, but one of the things that I've noticed, at least personally in my own progression, in my own political ideology, and just in my own development. Moment of disclosure, I'm only 25 years old. I don't pretend to know everything. I'm not trying to sit here and say, I know everything. You better listen to me. Everyone in the chat room at radionaut.com could probably do just as good of a job hosting the show as I can. I'm not saying I know everything. Most people know a lot more than me. This is a learning process for me. And so what's really cool is how much I've learned and progressed over the last year, or even over the last 2 years, going from not even being politically aware, politically active, to, I got a job at Thom Hartmann. I worked at Thom Hartmann for a couple of years. That really jump-started the political awareness and activism. But how that's progressed to a completely different level in myself now. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day about how it got to the point where it's like, well, don't you think, people like the Thom Hartmanns of the world are a little bit disingenuous, maybe, half truth here, not, false hope here, this kind of thing. Because, and I said, well, yes and no. You have to take into account that, a lot of people wouldn't know anything if it wasn't for the people like the Thom Hartmanns of the world. And what got to me was I was able to, for a moment, actually process how much I have progressed forward in the last year from, we need to be, left-right paradigm, Democrats and Republicans, to now it's like we need to be focusing on the activism, on the dissent, on the whistleblowing, on the real difference-making. And I was having this conversation with my friend, and a couple of things came up. Like, for example, do you ever notice how it all seems like a big circle, like it just keeps going around and around and around and around, and nothing actually ever gets fixed, nothing actually ever gets done. Real sustainable solutions, long-term, are not even brought up anymore in conversation. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. If these people actually solve the problems, then they'd be out of a job, right? So there's got to be some sort of job security. And I get that. I get that. But how have you progressed over the last year? Have you noticed any changes in your progression? And I guess what I'm really getting at is, why aren't we pushing further left? Why aren't we progressing farther left? And it irks me that so much so-called liberal media or so-called democratic media isn't pushing left anymore as much as it seems. It seems like our job, the official job of the democratic media now, is to push back against the right, whom we already know is crazy. So why bother? We talked a bit about this last time we filled in for Nicole Sandler. And so, if you caught those episodes last time and you were thinking about that, you wanted to call in and talk to us about that, would love to hear from you. I've got to share some listener feedback that Scott and I actually got from someone the last time we filled in for Nicole, too. So that's kind of cool. We'll get to that as well. There's a lot to reflect on over the past year, I think. And to take a minute and to, Yeah, my first inclination was to come up with a list of, the top 5 horrible things that happened this last year that we need to do something about, right? And it's so easy to become pessimistic, but pessimistic's really the wrong word. I think taking a hard look at reality is important. A cold, honest look at reality is what we're trying to do. But let's focus on something good, something positive for a minute. I think it's always a good thing, right? This comes to us from Medea Benjamin at codepink.org. It was published a couple days ago, and commondreams.org republished it, and that's where I found it, at commondreams.org, which is a website I read on almost a daily basis. And it starts off, Medea Benjamin writing, it would be easy to make a list of the top, 10 bad things like the wars, the government shutdowns, the drone attacks, the lack of progress here and there, so-called healthcare reform, which is a joke. But it's also been a year of extraordinary activism. Whistleblowers, dreamers, Walmart workers, peacemakers, advocates, garment workers, fast food workers. And as the year ends, I wanted to pay a tribute to the good things that their efforts have brought. And I agree. Good on Medea Benjamin for making this list. I love it. Number 1, the spontaneous uprising by the American people here that kept President Obama from invading Syria. Remember when that happened just a few months ago in the fall, and you saw people all over the nation. Here in Portland, Oregon, where I'm at, there was a big demonstration downtown. I mean, it was like instantaneous. The news comes out in the morning that, oh, President Obama is thinking about invading Syria because we're not sure what's going on there. And all of a sudden, instantaneously, there are demonstrations nationwide to say no more war. And after... well, of course, we're still in the Afghanistan war. We're still in Afghanistan, the longest war that we've ever been in. After 12, what has it been, 12, 13 years now, it seems like we're starting to become a little bit more war conscious, war wise, and people are beginning to understand that U.S. intervention is not necessarily always a good thing. Of course, we've got to be the policemen of the world, right? So we have to go around and make sure that everyone's doing the right thing. Of course, we're not doing the right thing, but that's a different topic. It's great to see that folks are mobilizing around that and how quickly it happened. And a difference was made. People showed up. They became the change that they wanted to see, even if it was temporarily, and made a difference. And that is something that we should reflect on. How about number 2? There have been talks with Iran. They're progressing despite Israel and the AIPAC's objections. Britain, China, France, Russia, the United States, Germany has made headway in finding a solution to defuse the crisis around the nuclear program there. Something to reflect on, to think about. Number 3, this is my personal favorite. Edward Snowden rocked the world of NSA spying. When he first blew the whistle on the NSA sweeping surveillance, he said that his greatest fear was not what the government would do to him, but that nothing would change. And here we are, a mere 6 months later, according to the interview that Edward Snowden gave with the Washington Post on Christmas, he says mission is accomplished. We'll dive into that a little bit more. And again, hey, thanks to Edward Snowden for his following his conscience, should we say. Number 4, the killer drones are taking a beating. Actually, I think it's kind of interesting. We have a Filter Free Radio YouTube channel where we post all of our videos, all of our episodes, everything that we've ever done is on our YouTube channel. It's all free. The single most watched video that we have ever done on Filter Free Radio, that's got the most hits, the most of any single video that we've ever done, is a short 5-10 minute piece that we talked about this former drone operator coming out, breaking his silence, and exposing what it was kind of like to be behind the scenes to operate these drones, and the kind of traumatic experience that left on that fellow. This has been by far the most popular video that we've ever posted so far. It's got more views than anything we've ever posted.
More than
And
the marijuana one?
even more than the legalized marijuana video, which is a very close second. and I think this is fantastic. People are saying, you know what? I don't like the idea of these drones going around the rest of the world and blowing up innocent people. I mean, how would you feel if your neighbor, you know, flew over a little remote control devastation device over your property and blew up part of your land or your tree or your house or whatever? You probably wouldn't like it. Begs a different question, though, of why are you doing that to begin with? But hey, and then you see in Colorado, these folks were talking about, well, if drones are going to be flying over my house, I'm going to be getting a drone hunting license, going to be shooting down the drones. I like that idea, but, you know, you got to be careful. You don't know if that's an Obama drone. It might shoot back at you. So you got to be careful, right? People are standing up to the drones, and that's great. Amazon, we're at you on this one, so oh well. Number 5 on Medea Benjamin's list of 10 top good things of 2013, a moment of reflection here. The Pope. I'm not Catholic. I'm not really big on the Pope. But Medea Benjamin really likes the idea that the Pope is sneaking out at night to feed the homeless, inviting homeless people to celebrate his birthday in the Vatican, washing the feet of the young prisoners, says he's not open to judge gay people, calls on the church to get beyond its fixation on reproduction and sexual morality. Pretty cool guy, I guess. You know, questioning the morality of capitalism. That's where I'm at. And he likes to take public transportation. That's cool, I guess. I don't know. It's not my list, but I do agree with most of these things. I agree with Edward Snowden, the drones so far. Low wage, this is number 6. Low-wage workers stepping up, saying low pay is not okay. Remember when we covered this? The fast food strikes. We covered it on our program. Just recently, I attended the demonstration here in Portland that was going on. Around the country, fast food and low-wage workers from McDonald's to Walmart, all the above, rose up demanding a living wage. And today, 34 states, including Washington, D.C., as well as other cities, have introduced or passed legislation on minimum wage issues, which we're going to get into that in just a little bit. What did the D.C. minimum wage go up to? But wait, there's a catch. I'll tell you more about that here coming up in a little bit later in the show. Number 7 of the top 10 things that we should be reflecting on, positive things over the last year. Number 7, Immigration Advocates, spectacular organization. And really, you know, their prayer vigils, the press conferences, the marches, the demonstrations, chaining themselves to the White House fence, showing up, whatever your cause is. And I think that's the beauty of all of us being individual and being unique. We all have different causes. We all have different values. We all have different inspirations that motivate us, and we should follow those. That's a gift. That's a blessing. So whatever you're motivated on, whether it's, you know, gay rights or immigration or healthcare or the climate, you know, you should participate and get active on it. Number 8, gay marriage is marriage equality. I don't like the term gay marriage. Me personally, I like the term marriage equality, but it's just me. It's becoming like apple pie, as American as apple pie. The Supreme Court struck down that Federal Defense of Marriage Act, and Illinois became the 15th state to legalize marriage equality. Number 9, the death penalty at home and abroad is dying slowly but steadily. This year, Maryland became the first state south of the Mason-Dixon line to finally abolish the death penalty, and the 18th state to do so. Signing the bill, Maryland's Governor O'Malley said that the death penalty does not deter crime, cannot be administered without racial bias, costs 3 times as much as life without parole, and a mistake cannot be reversed if an innocent person is put to death. I used to live in Maryland, so hey, good on you guys. Kind of sad, though. First state south of the Mason-Dixon line, still, really? And last but not least, number 10, top 10 things that, this is from Medea Benjamin at codepink.org. a few things we should reflect on, positive, good things about the year 2013. Number 10, one nation has come to its senses about smoking marijuana. That's Uruguay. In 2013, this year, the nation of Uruguay became the first country to fully legalize marijuana. Back home in the United States, though, Washington State, which is just to my north, in Colorado, has passed legalization laws and regulation laws for people over the age of 21. Of course, I figured it was going to happen here in Oregon. Didn't happen. Damn it. But that's a different story, and that's our second most popular video on YouTube, if you're so inclined. Scott, man, what is your take on reflecting on the last year? Do you have any thoughts? What is your reflective moment? Is there anything on that list that stands out to you?
No.
All right.
No, not really. I mean, that's a lot, and I think it's important to realize that there are people getting active. And for me, I guess if I had to think of anything, it's the fact that I'm becoming more aware of, and of course this is by reading alternative media, that there is a lot of rebellion in the world going on. And not to say Greece and Spain and Portugal and Canada and other parts of the world are actually getting up and protesting this global capitalist cabal, which is, I mean, we have this so-called free market and we have global capitalism, and they own us. They own the world. I mean, was it 400 people own more wealth than 80% of the world?
Right.
I mean, I'm talking globally, not just the U.S. It's astounding, right? And so these are this concentration of wealth will not stand, man. And so we have to take strength and find encouragement in other people's actions, and such is the danger of a good example, which is why you won't hear about these actions in the corporate media, because they don't want you to rise up and resist them. And let's face it, all the corporate media is owned by 5 companies, or I think is it 4 or 5 companies now, with Comcast merging with NBC. Anyway, the point is that we don't have a free press anymore. We only have just certainly not in the mainstream and certainly not on television. So we only have alternative media on the internet, which is a great resource. And through that alternative media, we're able to understand how other people are resisting this global capitalism, which is in no short sale is killing us all. I mean, they are the reason for climate change and climate chaos, and they are the reason that people are suffering. And poverty is a crime. It's one of the worst of crimes, and really, to quote George Bernard Shaw, all the crimes are virtues beside it. And so, I mean, and poverty is rapidly increasing in our society. I mean, not just the U.S., but in Canada and other parts of the world, because we have a raping and pillaging of the planet by these wealthy elites.
Yeah.
I mean, the Koch brothers, just to name one example. So I think it's important to take encouragement from action. And, the Occupy, though it sort of came and went, was just one small example of what we could be doing to resist this corporate takeover of our lives.
Yeah, that's right. If you camp out in front of Best Buy for a couple of days, you're a good American and a good consumer on Black Friday. But if you camp out in a public space for social justice, well, then you're just a damn dirty hippie that's going to get maced. So you better watch
right.
out.
You're on the terrorist watch list then.
Right. And so there you be, McGee. I'm happy that you pointed out that, Scott. Trying to differentiate between what is supposed to be, in my opinion, the purpose of real progressive liberal media and that of, like, the corporate media. The folks in the chat room chatting, is this going to be 2 hours of recapping 2013? No. But they say, well, maybe I was hoping you'd talk about, what the senators and congressmen and the town halls are saying in the interviews during winter break. I want to avoid that because it's all the same shit, day after day, same. It's like,
yeah, you really can't at this point to believe that politics, or to believe that electoral politics is going to change anything is extremely dangerous and naive. I mean, clearly the election of Barack Obama and all these other corporate hacks have proven to us that electoral politics doesn't solve anything. And if I can quote Karl Popper right here, the question is not how do we get good people to lead. Those who are attracted to power are inherently mediocre at best and more often venal. The question is, How do we make those who are in power afraid of us? And right now, the powerful are afraid of Wall Street. They're afraid of the Koch brothers. They're afraid of all these corporate, captains of industry, if you
And
will.
losing
they're very
their
wealthy.
job security.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. If you have to raise $1 billion to become president, then you're beholden to those people for everything.
Yeah.
There's a reason. There's a reason Barack Obama and all these other hacks have not done anything about the jobs or anything about extending unemployment or anything. I mean, if he really believed that these things need to be worked on, he would have gone on national television, given a speech. He got up there like George Bush did on the March to Iraq War, and say, "We need everyone to get behind us," and
Go shopping.
And he would, yeah, right. Except for something far more productive, preferably. And that's what would have happened. That would have been a rational response, but to call people to action to say, this is what we need to get a jobs bill done. This is what we need because people need to go back to work. People need health care, blah, blah, blah. But that didn't happen. And the reason that didn't happen is because they don't work for us. They work for the wealthy interests who got them elected, who paid for them to be elected. And so at this point, to place any energy at all into electoral politics and to pay attention at all to what they're doing, any more than extemporaneously. I mean, you spend 5 minutes maybe thinking about it or reading about it, but other than that, the focus should be on how do we affect real change in our society, and that means activism. I mean, the liberty, it's excuse me.
Oh,
Oops.
look out!
Sorry about that. The thing we've seen or forgotten, and this is what was lost when we lost the civil rights movement. The civil rights, the suffragists, fought for women's rights. The Liberty Party fought for slavery. All these movements knew that the action is what was required. Nothing changes without movements, and we don't have any movements in this country right now. We did have a gay rights movement. I mean, and let's face it, they did. They are fighting for equality in marriage, but we don't have any actual movements to change our society radically. And at this point, when we're talking about the U.S., I mean, just for example, NPR the other day did a whole piece on how the U.S. is now going to be the world's largest exporter of oil, or the world's largest. We're going to be drilling more oil than Saudi Arabia. Well, that's not, that's insanity. I mean, in the face of this climate crisis, that's insanity. The fact that we're just ramping up more and more and more fossil fuel drilling. I mean, a rational response would be to radically shift our economy to a green, renewable economy, to have a space race for clean, renewable energy, and to get off fossil fuels altogether before it kills us and the entire planet, for that matter. But that's not what we're doing.
No.
And that's because the people in power obviously are controlled by, power. The people in office in our political structure are obviously controlled by the rich and the powerful, and they don't include us. They own us, as George Carlin would say. And so I think for me, it's a big shift, if I could just to coin a phrase, to think more about civics and less about politics. Politics is just a circus. It's a sideshow. Civics and civic action and what is needed is what is really essential in our society. And we've lost that. We've lost that understanding that we need to be active in our community. We can't just vote and watch and see what happens. It doesn't work.
And this is kind of the whole purpose why I wanted to come on here and try to do some sort of reflection period here, is the fact that none of us actually really reflect and think about the progress and think about where we're going. It's like, I keep hearing Hillary 2016, Hillary's going to be the hope and change. It's like, wake up, people. Don't you fucking get it? If you were one of those ones who bought into the hope and change, Obama's going to save the world. I voted for Obama. I voted for Obama again. But now I realize that he's a bad guy and the drones and bad and bad Obama. First of all, you're not reflecting. You're not owning up to your actions. It's responsibility. It's taking responsibility for what is going on in the world rather than just sort of, it's like my one friend says, politics has become nothing more than a sporting event. You watch it like you watch football or something, and then you vote once every 4 years, and then you sit back and watch. Well, that's not how change happens. No. And it's really it's about the whole part of the conservatives or all the cynics or whatever say, it's blame yourself. Right. And there is some truth to that, because we are, as a society on a larger scale, responsible for the actions in our own community. And so if we are able to take responsibility, it's like the Derek Jensen quote we played last show. Yeah. Where he said, it's not my responsibility for driving a car, having been born into a car culture,
it's my responsibility for not shutting down car culture as a whole, for global warming, and that is much more serious. And if you step back and think of it in much larger terms, then you realize that electoral politics is something, you do once every 4 years, but then you get back out in the streets.
Yep.
And you make those people in power do it. I mean, I think even Obama and some other president, he coined a phrase from, said, now, FDR said, now make me do it,
Yep.
Well, the only way to make them do it is to be out in the streets.
Bingo. So maybe we can take a second here and reflect and say, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe all those things that I was hoping for didn't actually come true because I didn't actually follow through and live up to my end of the deal. Are you living up to your end of the deal? Let's continue the conversation. It's the Nicole Sandler Show, radioornot.com. Take a real short coffee warm-up break, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
The Nicole Sandler Show. Truth to power, baby.
Sometimes it pays just to go away. You could ask Jim Skinner about that. He was CEO of the hamburger behemoth McDonald's, pulling down a hefty $8.8 million in pay. Last year, though, Skinner retired, and rather than getting a gold watch, he was given a load of gold, so large that even a Brinks armored truck would have been too small to haul it all away. His salary of $753,000 was the least of it. The Big Mac chain also served up $1.7 million to the chief in stock and $3 million in option awards. Then it slathered on another $10.2 million in retirement pay. All that was topped by a super-rich dessert, $11.6 million in incentive pay. What? Why does a guy with millions already on his food tray need any incentive to do his job? Maybe because Skinner found it hard to stomach the biggest part of his job, which was to pay poverty wages to McDonald's 800,000 workers, shove thousands of them onto food stamps and other programs paid for by taxpayers, and lobby aggressively to prevent any increases in minimum wage or any tax hikes on uber-rich elites like him. It's dirty work, but Skinner did it, finally skipping away with a 2012 pay package totaling $27.7 million. Yet, in the phantasmagoric plutocracy of corporate land, too much is not enough. Last year, for the first time ever, the 10 highest-paid CEOs in America hauled in at least $100 million each, even as the great majority of workaday families have lost income. This is Jim Hightower saying, this gaping and ever-widening inequality is the greatest threat to our society's cohesion. Too few people now control an unconscionable and untenable share of America's money and power, using it to grab more of both for themselves.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
We need a movement of truth tellers.
The kind of progressive grassroots movement.
A social movement that they can engage in that's not the politics of hatred, that's not the politics of fear, but the politics of hope.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Sky.
There's two ways to approach history. You sit in your armchair and you watch it on the news and you return to your PlayStation, or you get out in the streets and you make it.
They can push the rest of us to wake up and do something about this.
People need to rise up and say, I'm sick of this.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Seeing themselves as a huge movement to transform the nation.
The change that we want comes from below. It comes from a movement.
The American people can and will find ways to push for the kinds of changes that can get us out of this dilemma.
I want to see that change, and it's going to take people here in this country to be able to make that happen.
Filter Free Radio. FilterFreeRadio.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Bill Maher, you're here in Miami on Friday night. You're doing a show at the Fillmore at the Jackie Gleason Theater. They just renamed this theater the Fillmore. And they put up a couple of psychedelic posters. So I guess...
Is it the theater Jackie did his TV show from?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What I hear they did is put up 2 of those old Bill Graham posters and renamed it.
Yeah, I can't think of 2 different icons of show business.
Yeah, really.
Bill Graham and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, why they just didn't play up the Jackie Gleason aspect, I don't know. But then again, this is South Florida.
Right.
Okay.
Welcome to it.
I feel warned.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at radioornot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. Questioning authority daily. The Nicole Sandler Show.
Hey, it is the Nicole Sandler Show live for a Monday morning. It is December 30th, 2013. We're live at RadioOrNot.com, SoFloRadio.com, TalkRadio1.com. We're live on Liberal Justice Radio on the TuneIn app. Thanks, Mr. Kenny Pick. And lots of other outlets. It's so good to be with you. As you know by now, Nicole Sandler's in for Randy Rhoads nationwide, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, randyrhoads.com. So, of course, you're here this morning looking for Nicole. She's going to be with you in just a couple hours. Stay tuned. And, just helping her alleviate that workload a little bit during the holidays. It's pretty hard to do a daily 2-hour program, let alone 5 hours of radio every day. That's a little much. I mean, it's a little much for us to do 2 hours once a week. But granted, we're looking for real news. So, I don't know. Anyways, that was probably not the right thing to say. I wanted to share, of course, we're asking for folks to participate in the program. We always love your comments, especially if you disagree with me. I'm not trying to say I know everything. This is a learning process for all of us. So if we can maintain an open mind and listen to each other, I think we'll get somewhere here. And that said, we filled in for Nicole. We helped out a little bit last week or week before last during the holidays, and we got a little feedback, and so I want to share a little bit of that with you. Here we go. Oh, what happened to my thing?
You've got mail. Stick it in the mailbox. Why don't you stick it in the mailbox and I'll give it to you when I can.
Oh, is that the mail? Is there anything in there for me?
What's this? A letter for me.
Hello, you've reached Jacob. Sorry he can't get to his phone right now. Please leave a message and he will get back to you. Thanks, and have a great day.
And so if you comment to us, you can give us a shout on the email or give us a call in to the comment line, 503-746-TALK. This email comes to us from a listener. It says, "Hi, Jacob. I'm a fan supporter of Nicole's show, and I've been listening to you fill in this last week. And I just wanted to drop you a line about nonviolence and mention a couple of things about the position that you and Scott are taking. First, I find it disturbing that we seem to have allowed the concept of violence to idle from hurting and killing people or other living things to damaging property. People and property are not the same, and labeling harm to people and property as equivalent violence seems to me to have a lot in common with corporations have human rights. Second, it might be worth your while to read Derek Jensen on the subject of violent activism. It may not change your mind. It has not changed mine, but it will give you a clear idea of the issues and ramifications involved. I suggest you read Endgame Parts 1 and 2 if you cannot find excerpts, thoughts online, and text video and stuff if you Google him. Thank you for emailing. And hey, by the way, if you're catching us on a rebroadcast or something, I'd still love to hear from you. Send us your notes and stuff. Real quick, I have Derek Jensen's Endgame. It's right here. I haven't read the whole thing. As you see, it's a little thick. But Scott and I have watched hours and hours of his talks online, which are just as lengthy as the books, but they're really good. I'm a more audio-visual person anyways. I'd rather listen to his speech on YouTube than read the book, personally. Easier for me that way. But I want to, thank the listener there for sending us a note. My response to that is I am, a Jesus-esque nonviolent person. I don't like violence. I'm not one of those people who, when they drive by a traffic accident, they have to slow down real quick and check everything out that's going on. I avoid it. I drive as fast as I can. I don't like violence. I'm not a violent person.
Rubbernecking?
What?
You're not a rubbernecker?
No.
Rubbernecker.
No, I'm not. And so, you know, it's like, well, you know, nonviolence doesn't work. The thing is we actually haven't really tried the nonviolent massive protest demonstration yet. We haven't actually had 1 million people show up on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., nonviolently occupying and demanding rights. We haven't actually really tried that yet. And so until that actually fails, and I see it with my own eyes, I'm not going to take any other position on that particularly. Scott, your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I got a lot of thoughts on that one. There's you know, she's right in some respects. There should be a distinction between you know, violence against infrastructure and what do you call it, material possessions or whatever, versus, you know, obviously violence against people. You know, and so there's a big difference. It's like, and Derek Jensen talks a lot about this in his book Endgame and his talk. If you haven't listened to his Endgame lecture on YouTube, I encourage you to do it. It's a long one. It's an hour and a half, and he rambles a bit. But it's really, you know, interesting his take on things. Also, for that matter, too, there's what really did it for me was he and Chris Hedges had a discussion on Truthdig some years back. It might be 4 years ago now, and I'm sure it's still on there in the archives.
It's on violence, yeah.
Yeah, it was because they did the movie called Capitalism is the Crisis. Right. And so someone was making that movie, and they interviewed the two of them, and they both debated the use of violence and how to bring about change. And so that lecture is still on YouTube, or that discussion is still on YouTube. If not, it's also on the movie Capitalism is the Crisis. And that is the fact that there's two schools of thought to this. One, as Hedges points out, you know, at what point do you say, well, we're going to have to stop climate change. We're going to have to stop the people who are causing climate change. And if nothing's going to change, well, I mean, do you wait to 500 parts per million, 600 parts per million in the atmosphere before you start trying to take down coal plants and these things, you know, to try and shut down, you know, physically shut down these engines of global warming or climate change or whatever you want to call it. Or, you know, or do we, you know, how do we do that? I mean, obviously, you know, we're not in a Hitler scenario where if you kill Hitler, the war ends. We don't have that luxury, if that's such a luxury. You know, there's no one figurehead that if you take them down, things will change. So it doesn't work that way. So, I mean, violence against people and violence against infrastructure and things is vastly different. That said, in order to create a mainstream movement, and we don't have any movements, you have to draw a broad swath of people in. I mean, it's like, yeah. And
you've got to win over hearts and minds, all hearts and minds.
Right, and that's what made the Occupy movement so dangerous, was that it was a mainstream movement, and you did have women and children of all swaths and all, you know, race, creeds, and colors out there in the street, and you did so because it was nonviolent. Because people didn't feel threatened, they didn't feel dangerous, they felt that they could identify with some of it. And then, you know, there is something inherently conservative about calling for the restoration of the rule of law, about calling for these corporate criminals to go to jail. That's a conservative position. And you can appeal to, you know, even if you are a right wing or left wing or whatever you want to call it, across the whole spectrum. We can all agree that these guys are criminals and they need to go to jail. Okay, and so that's just a real general statement, and you get people in the streets that way. Now you start breaking windows in Starbucks and stuff, you know, it doesn't draw people into the streets. And so that's sort of you know, it's what they call it, you know, hooliganism, I guess is the word they use.
The two things that come to mind are read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, a pragmatic primer. I think that's what the subtitle is, which we did a whole program on that book. Or you could read Gene Sharp's From Dictatorship to Democracy, another fantastic pragmatic kind of step-by-step guide for activism and the like. And we did a whole program on that book as well. My whole point here is we're not doing enough to fight for the causes that we stand for, period. And let me be at the front of the line. Big hypocrite here. We do a little, you know, spiel here, and we talk about, yeah, we need to be doing this, need to be doing this. I still drive a car that takes gas. I don't use public transportation as much as I should. I'm a poor to middle class a person. So I mean, I don't have the luxury of going and buying, for example, the high-end quality organic stuff from a local vendor because I have to be conscious of my consumption.
You're not driving a Tesla and plugging it into your solar array in your backyard. You don't, you know.
Right, and I get that. But if we actually took control over the little things in our lives that we do have control over, like grow a garden, take the public transportation, don't shop at Walmart, vote with your wallet, these kinds of things, it really does add up. It really does make a difference, and it really does empower us to make the right choices.
Plus, you end up meeting more like-minded individuals. I mean, that's how I met people. I shop at my local co-op. I became a member of my CSA, and food is the easiest place to start, I think. I mean, if you can agree to stop shopping at your national food chain and stop buying food from the food industrial complex, just pick one little thing. Like, I decided I didn't want to indulge in high fructose corn syrup anymore. I want to cut that out of my life. Well, that meant radically changing my diet, because you can't eat most of the shit. Most of it is some sort of rearrangement of corn. Mm-hmm. You know, so you want to cut the corn out of your life from the food industrial complex. Well, that requires eating local, and it requires a whole vast change in your lifestyle. So that's just one small example. But my point is that getting back to the whole violence versus nonviolence thing. I mean, there's lots of Chris Hedges actually had an article not too long ago called "The Saboteurs," where he profiled Weibo Ludwig, a Messianic Christian minister in northern Alberta, Canada, who basically was going around and pouring concrete down fracking wells. You know, yeah, he was literally, and he was doing it, and he actually had, you know, they could never trace it back to him because he never got caught. He did it, you know, obviously under the cover of darkness or whatever, and people, even though he was this sort of crazy radical, you know, Messianic Christian minister, who basically lived in a compound, you know. Right. He had the support of the community because everyone understood that these fracking wells are poisoning the environment. They're killing people. They're literally poisoning the water supply that people survive on. And so he had the support of everybody up until the point where some of the teenagers of some of the oil rig or frack gas rig or whatever workers, you know, were driving drunk and making a lot of noise through the camp that this Christian minister's people lived, and someone shot and killed one of those kids. Well, after that was it. That's the end of it. And he lost the support of the community, and you know, eventually he was arrested, and I think he's dead now. But anyway, the long story short is that in order to grasp the need for I guess building a community and building a sense of understanding across political spectrums, across whatever spectrum you want to classify things as, it's necessary to remain nonviolent. Okay, and until you get to such a galvanized point where, you know, you have, I don't know, military in the streets, you know, trying to suppress dissent and violently doing so, because the thing to remember is that, you know, any use of violence, I mean, whether you throw a rock at a cop or whatever, you know, any nominal use of violence, or you break a window, you give the police state the right to violently oppress you and everybody around you. I mean, the fact of the matter is these NRA gun nuts don't have enough guns to fight the police. The police have been militarized to the point of having tanks, right? And so it's insane, this kind of notion that if we actually do have to come down to a civil war, it doesn't work. Civil wars don't work, by the way. There's a whole study by Erica Chenoweth, and Chris Hedges quotes her in one of his articles called, anyway, her book is called Rethinking Violence, States and Non-State Actors in Conflict, and her other book is called Why Civil Resistance Works, A Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict.
There's a fantastic blog, I think it's called Waging Nonviolence. I think it's like wagingnonviolence.org or something like that.
That's correct. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Check it out. It's good stuff. Folks in the chat room at radionaut.com are talking about a fantastic analogy here, and that's the story of David and Goliath. How often do we feel like the David in this, going up against this almost unsurmountable Goliath, you know, and so many people turn to despair. I'm just one person. What can I do? I can't make a difference. You know, voting doesn't really matter. So, I mean, we've already lost. So what good is it? I think the point of David and Goliath is that David won. You know, he was the underdog. And he knew that he didn't really have a chance, but he still fought and he won. And
well, they're absolutely right too, and that is the whole. And it's I don't know if you have that Chris Hedges clip from his most recent speech on the myth of human progress, but it's where he basically says, we have to grasp this harsh reality and not let this reality paralyze us.
Right.
And we have to respond rationally to what is going on in the society. But so many of us are delusional. I mean, we spend our days on our iPads and our phones, and it's just electronic hallucinations and watching this corporate media spin us one way or the other. It's a soap opera and it's a distraction. And to be focused in the real, and to live in truth,
yes,
is a really hard thing to do. And
Yes.
it's also painful and uncomfortable in many situations. And that's why, if
so
you
many
live in
people
truth,
don't do it.
right? Because it's disempowering if you don't have a way to rationally respond to it.
Yeah.
And so, but to first grasp reality and then not let reality paralyze us is one of the most important things we have to do. But right now, no one grasps reality. I mean, people are talking about Hillary Clinton in 2016 as if it makes a fucking difference.
Right.
It doesn't. If anything, that would be the final nail in the coffin, the coup de grace.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, so it's like. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm ready to move on. But what were you going to say? Finish.
Oh no, I was just going to say. I mean, it's shutting out the poison is a really
Yes.
important first step, and that's what's disempowering, is listening to the MSNBCs or the Fox Newses or even giving a shit what any of those people say. It's totally irrelevant, and their job is to disempower you, because that's what they do. Their job is to make you think that you have no choices, that you have to choose one or the other, and that by itself is disempowering. But if you shut that poison out, and you become active in your community, and you form groups of new people, and you make new friends, and you go out and you do things. And there's websites for this, like you mentioned, Waging Nonviolence. There's a lot of websites out there that you can build and find people in your community and go out and protest in the streets, because that's really all we have left, and it's all we've ever had. Activism is in the streets, and activism is what changes things. Voting doesn't change anything. If voting changed anything, it'd be illegal.
Oh, where's my? I have a thing for that somewhere, I think. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, exactly. So, if you're tuning in, if you're just joining us, of course, this is Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott of Filter Free Radio. We host our program, Filter Free Radio, Monday evenings on Nicole Sandler's Radio or Not network. Nicole is off this morning of her regular show, but she is going to be with you coming up in just a couple of hours, live in for Randy Rhoads Nationwide, all again this week. It is the holidays, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. RandyRhoads.com is the website. If you're wondering, well, how come you're not talking about the congressmen or the senators on vacation? It's because I don't give a shit about that. I want to talk about Chris Hedges and Cornel West and Derek Jensen and Jeremy Scahill and Greg Palast. I want to talk about what they're doing. I don't give a shit what John McCain's doing. I already know what he's doing. It's a bunch of shit. You know what I'm saying? So don't waste our time. Here,
that too, and an individual is less important than the action and the message. I mean, these individuals are we've made celebrities out of our politicians, and it's part of the celebrity culture, and it's not relevant.
You know, I have to admit, I'm guilty doing that. For example, like with Edward Snowden, Edward Snowden's whole point is, don't make the story about me. It's about what the NSA is doing. And see how, it's Edward Snowden. It's not really the focus is on what the NSA is doing. The focus is not on the violation of your Fourth Amendment rights to privacy. The focus is on, Edward Snowden's in asylum in Russia. It's like, see, you got to be careful here. We started this conversation on, violence and stuff. What sparked the conversation was we got an email from a listener who enjoyed the conversation and wanted to participate in it. And that's what I'm hoping we will get more of. We have all of our contact information scrolling across the top of the screen here. I understand, a lot of people don't listen to the show live. I still want to hear from you. Give us a call at the phone number. You can call it anytime, 24/7. It's 503-746-TALK, or send us an email, jacob@filterfreeradio.com. Scott's got an email address, too. It's skeptical@filterfreeradio.com, but I don't know how often you check that email.
I've actually never checked it, and for some reason I've never... Not never. It's just that
like once, a couple of years ago.
Some time ago, you updated the website, and I haven't been able to get back in, man. I don't know. I gotta figure out how to reconfigure that.
We'll figure it out. If you're sending emails to Scott wondering why he's not responding, just send it to me, and I'll make sure that Scott gets it. There we go. We did get one more email from a different listener who I wanted to share what this listener had to say. And she said, I listen to the Nicole Sandler show, and I don't listen live. I catch it on the recording. Because I wasn't listening live, I could not call into the show, which is why I wanted to email you. I just wanted to let you know that I thoroughly enjoyed your broadcast. I think you and Scott are terrific. I'm right there with your message, and I am sick and tired of hearing the same crap over and over again. I'm a baby boomer, and I marched against the Vietnam War. People have had their heads stuck in the sand. Thanks for stepping in. I will listen to Filter Free Radio from now on. Thank you. Hey, where's my my little thing? Hey, all right. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I would really love to hear from more folks, especially if you disagree. Because again, I'm not trying to take the position of I know everything, know it all. I'm taking the position of I'm only 25 years old. I'm a little bit more aware of what's happening than my cohorts of my age, and I'm going to have to live with it for the next 50 years, etc. And so I'm trying to do something about it. They'll help. Anyways, if you're wondering, well, how come you're not talking about what John McCain said on Meet the Press? It's because we don't give a shit. We're not going to try to waste your time.
I mean, if you wanted to hear that, you could turn on MSNBC or whatever. It's just garbage.
Yeah, and so shut out.
That's part of the problem. Yeah.
Shut out the poison, like Scott was.
And I have to point out too. I didn't arrive at these opinions lightly. I mean, it took me years to evolve into my understanding of how systems of power work. I mean, I used to be an avid listener. I watched. I mean, can you remember Keith Olbermann? Yep. It was Keith Olbermann for an hour, then it was Rachel Maddow for an hour.
Yep.
On MSNBC, I watched them religiously, along with other, yet to be named talk radio hosts. And so, but I evolved to the point where there was so many gaps in their information, gaps in their answers and questions that I sought to fill in those gaps. With why are the Democrats so weak? Why when we had 2 years of the House, the Senate, and the White House, did nothing change? And that, for me, if that didn't do it for you, I don't know what will. I mean, the fact that they were in power and had carte blanche to do whatever they wanted, and nothing got done, and it's just
no change. Exactly, no change is going to come from the status quo.
Hence, right, those people.
The status quo is the status quo. They're not going to change.
Yeah, once you understand the profits to be had by these very individuals that are in these situations. I mean, let's face it, Obama himself is going to make millions of dollars in speaking fees and royalties and whatever he gets from books or even working for the corporate state when he leaves office. And the same is true for Bill Clinton, and the same is true for Hillary. I mean, all these people work for the corporate state in one form or another. I mean, Hillary Clinton used to be on the board of Walmart, for example. And so these people, they're not. It's the problem with our society is the celebrity culture. And we look at these celebrities as people in power, and they're not. They're just hacks. I mean, you and I don't want to. I don't want to be president. I don't want that responsibility.
No,
it's insanity. I mean, it's.
Have you seen how gray Obama's gotten over the last 5 years?
Well, he knows he'll be killed if he steps out of line. Let's face it. He probably read the CIA documents on how they killed Kennedy, and it's like, oh, okay, I better do what you tell me then. That's why. That's why he appointed all these Wall Street banksters to head his cabinet. I mean, and the list is long of people who are insiders and who's who. And it's a really incestuous, I almost want to say clan. Mm-hmm. It's an incestuous group of people who all know each other and are all friends with each other. And it's like that, they take care of their own. The rich and the wealthy take care of their own. Yeah. And fuck the rest of us.
Well, yeah, and that's a conversation. If you missed Scott and I filling in for Nicole a couple weeks ago, go back. Of course, it's at radioornot.com and Ustream, and the podcast is out there on YouTube and other places. We did a whole hour on how the rich really are different from us, because when you have that much money, everything else becomes disposable. Relationships become disposable. People become disposable. Family, friends become disposable. The only thing that matters is getting more money. And when was the last time you saw Warren Buffett say, "Oh, I got too much money"? No.
He just says, "I'm not taxed enough."
Exactly. So
even that's a big, half truth.
And when I don't know, it's like greed. The greed epidemic bothers me, and the
Capitalism
selfishness
is the crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, once we understand that the system which we live under itself is the problem and not the players of the system, we cannot change the players and expect them to change the game.
Right.
They got to that position by playing the game better than anybody else, and they're not about to change it.
Right. Hence the status quo, and why real change needs to permeate from outside the system. I want to go ahead.
It starts bottom up.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, man. It's the top of the hour here. It's 8 o'clock on the West Coast, 11 a.m. on the East Coast. In for Nicole Sandler, Jacob Dean, and Mr. Skeptical Scott here. The fantastic folks at the Talk Radio News Service, talkradionews.com, are taking a well-needed break, vacation. And so I figured, let's take a short break ourselves, get a coffee warm-up, come back, continue this conversation here in just a minute right after these messages. Don't go anywhere. The Nicole Sandler Show on RadioOrNot.com, Talk Radio 1, SoFlo Radio, and other outlets will continue right after this.
The Nicole Sandler Show.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. After A&E put Duck Dynasty star Phil Robertson on indefinite hiatus following racist and homophobic remarks in GQ, conservatives rushed to Robertson's defense. Among his defenders was Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, who said in a statement, "I find a good bit of it offensive, but I also acknowledge that this is a free country and everyone is entitled to express their views. In fact, I remember when TV networks believed in the First Amendment." But Fox News' Steve Doocy pushed back on this argument when co-host Brian Kilmeade tried to bring it up again on Fox and Friends.
And by the way, from GLAAD last night on Megyn Kelly's show, this is not a free speech issue. What the defenders of Phil Robertson are seeking is freedom from consequence. I don't think that's true at all.
Well, it's not free speech because A&E is a private company, can do anything they want.
And they did.
Numerous commentators have similarly pointed out that statements like Jindal's inaccurately interpret the First Amendment. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Looking for filters? Check your coffee maker. This is Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott. FilterFreeRadio.com. Get ready to suck down some grounds.
When I talk about resistance, I think we have to stand up now and carry out acts of nonviolent resistance.
Because the truth is, we do have power.
We live in revolutionary times, but the counter-revolution is winning.
Sounds like a case of the Mondays.
Live Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. FilterFreeRadio.com.
This is my favorite show.
We have been given an opportunity to make a new beginning.
And I think it's very important for us to start to build a culture of resistance because what we're doing isn't working, clearly.
It's our job to very coldly assess reality and then figure out how to respond.
Your number one source for unfiltered truth, analysis, and solutions. FilterFreeRadio.com.
What the hell? Are you stuck at home on a Saturday night with nothing to do again?
I can't take it anymore!
Then join me, my co-hosts, and my guests every Saturday evening for Mic Check Radio with Adam Hebert. Okay. Together we'll discuss the big news of the week from entertainment and politics, talk about the issues that are on your mind, and hey, we'll even talk about general stupidity and jackassery from the American right.
You stupid jackass!
So join me every Saturday evening, 6 to 9 p.m. Central at my Ustream home, Mic Check Radio. Come on in, it'll be loads of fun.
Gee, I sure hope there's a happy ending. I love a happy ending.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to The Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Greg Palast, I realized as we were talking that actually we were supposed to do this on Wednesday, so thank you so much for bearing with me.
Well, I am thrilled that we're doing that. You've jumped the other characters. Because, Nicole, I just think that your show is brilliant, and I want to thank you because my stuff may be prime time in Britain, but here I keep slamming into the electronic Berlin Wall, and you have snuck me across and into the information stream. And I hope that your listeners are aware of how important and precious your program is. So I want to thank you.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at radioornot.com.
Do it live! And this is how you know we are broadcasting live, because the fantastic computer machine has stopped working. Oh, don't do this to me. Come on, baby. Well. Bear with us here. Nicole actually doesn't really do bumpers when she takes breaks, does she? So, there we go.
RadioOrNot.com. Questioning authority daily. The Nicole Sandler Show.
And we're back, and we're live, as you can tell. It is December 30th, 2013. Nicole Sandler in for Randy Rhoads nationwide today, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. It's still the holiday season. It's still 2013. And Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott here from Filter Free Radio in for Nicole. The honor of filling in. Talking just before the break about how trying to differentiate the difference between what we're trying to do and what, for example, you hear in the mainstream media, the corporate media is covering. We are for anything, really, that kind of fucks up the status quo.
Again, it goes back to the concrete. If we're not dealing in the concrete, and the Green Party, I think, has spent a lot of time not dealing in the concrete, you're wasting your time, everyone's time. So I'm for anything that fucks the system up. And raising the minimum wage fucks them up, great. Any way we can go.
And that's Chris Hedges speaking to a Green Party convention in New Jersey saying, I don't think the Green Party is dealing enough in the real. He's not even talking about the Democratic Party. So we're not even going there.
You got to have, at the very least, if you are to endorse political parties, it's going to have to be an alternative to the two corporate parties.
The duopoly.
It's a duopoly, yeah. And there's a reason why after the Ross Perot embarrassed them all. I think, what was it, 92 or something?
Giant sucking sound heading south.
Giant sucking sound heading down to Mexico. And he was right. He was right. He was a crazy billionaire, but he was right. And ever since then, there are no third parties allowed in the debates.
Yeah, thanks, Bill Clinton. We love NAFTA and SHAFTA and
the GAO and GATT and
hey,
here we are.
And Obama's got plenty of TP coming, TTP or TPP.
It's a TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TAP, it's the TAP, the Transatlantic Partnership. It's just another global cabal. I mean, that's the whole thing about free trade. People like to blame the unions. That's what the right-wing mantra wants you to believe. But the fact of the matter is that free trade, the whole notion of if it costs $1 to make something here and it costs a penny to make it in China, well, there's a 99-cent tariff. Right. Well, that no longer is the case. Right. And therefore, we have no unions. We have no more, manufacturing in our country.
I hate to put words in other people's mouth, but is it fair to say, Scott, that you'd wipe your ass with the TPP? I am not above bathroom humor, even this early in the morning. Just to let you know.
Yeah, you gotta laugh at some of it. If you can't laugh, you go crazy.
Fair warning. A little bit of news. Just to give you a little bit of news headlines. I found this interesting. Of course, as you may know, the President Obama, is on vacation in Hawaii, and what you may not know, of course, that this story has been completely shut out of any corporate media, is that President Obama has been meeting a bunch of protesters in Hawaii on his vacation. Good on you folks. This is coming to us from Reuters. Reuters reporting the serenity of President Barack Obama's Hawaiian vacation has been rattled a bit this weekend when demonstrators aired grievances against drones, unmanned aircrafts, and other issues in a small protest near the First Family's upscale rented house in Hawaii. Obama's motorcade passed a few dozen protesters holding signs with slogans including drones, unethical and illegal, U.S. bases out, and close Guantanamo now. Others exposed their opposition to genetically modified foods. It marked a second day of peaceful protests surrounding Obama, who is spending a 2-week vacation there in Hawaii. And on Friday, about 27 protesters turned out to demonstrate against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP trade pact being negotiated right now between the United States and other, Asian and South American countries. And Obama said, following in the footsteps of my predecessors. And I'm not going to change the status quo. Because, well, then there'd be problems. More problems than if we... It's kind of sad, isn't it? Embrace the suck. You heard it from Nancy Pelosi. You have to embrace the suck. So don't you don't you do anything else. Just sit there and remain silent. And that's the really unfortunate thing is most of us don't do enough, and they bank on that. They bank on...
Sounds like the George Carlin quote there, buddy.
Yeah, it is the George Carlin quote.
Get the handy, come on, man, pull it out.
Essentially.
Or he's like, they want obedient workers.
Yeah, it's a long quote, though.
Maybe we can play it on a break then.
Anyways. I got a couple of clips. We actually have something to talk about, some other stuff to talk about. Did you get your Christmas message from Mr. Edward Snowden? Now, we're just talking about how the news isn't about Edward Snowden. It's about what the NSA is up to. But I think one of the best spokesmen for that issue is Edward Snowden. And he has remained in asylum in Russia for the last 6 months. Finally put out like a minute and a half online video that was given. He did an interview with the Washington Post. And I want to share a little bit of that with you. This is from the Washington Post interview. This is Edward Snowden. And this is why privacy matters. And I think this is a really big deal.
Hi, and Merry Christmas. I'm honored to have a chance to speak with you and your family this year. Recently, we learned that our governments, working in concert, have created a system of worldwide mass surveillance, watching everything we do. Great Britain's George Orwell warned us of the danger of this kind of information. The types of collection in the book, microphones and video cameras, TVs that watch us, are nothing compared to what we have available today. We have sensors in our pockets that track us everywhere we go. Think about what this means for the privacy of the average person. A child born today will grow up with no conception of privacy at all.
That's scary.
They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves, an unrecorded, unanalyzed thought. And that's a problem, because privacy matters. Privacy is what allows us to determine who we are and who we want to be.
That is a problem. You see, most of the people who are listening to this program right now are able to conceive a thought pre-NSA, or even, in my example, pre-9/11. Let me put this thought into your brain. Do you realize that my generation, the 20-somethings, will never know a world before 9/11? Think about that. And I want to put the responsibility in the lap of the older folks who know what it was like before all of this. It's up to you, really, to enlighten us, because we have no clue. See? And that's scary.
That's the whole thing. You only have the Constitution, and this is a Glenn Greenwald quote. He's like, the Constitution is only valid if you know about it. Like you don't, if you knew you had Fourth Amendment rights, if you knew what the Fourth and Fifth Amendment said, that's when it works for you. If you don't know, then it'll certainly be taken from you or used against you. I mean, that's the whole right to remain silent. That's the whole Miranda rights. That came about by police interrogating people illegally without actually reading them their rights first. And all this other good stuff. And so the point of the matter is that you have to know your constitutional rights, or you won't have them.
Yeah, exactly. And the Constitution is only as good as the person who knows it. So, hey, as much as we hate lawyers, at least they're learning the right things, I guess, sort of. someone in the chat room just mentioned that they really are disappointed with how MSNBC is portraying Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald. Funny you bring that up, because I have ready a couple of clips that I want to share with you from just a couple of days ago when MSNBC was interviewing Glenn Greenwald. And I really love to watch anytime Glenn Greenwald is interviewed by MSNBC. You know something good's going to happen. And
man, he is really sharp and witty, man. I got to tell you, he's very biting.
Yes, he's a cunning linguist and a master debater. And but I wanted to share this with you to really kind of reiterate my positioning and where I stand on this, and I'm sure this kind of speaks for Scott too. The corporate media is full of lies and full of garbage, and that includes MSNBC. Wake up, people. And the fact that they demonize Edward Snowden, they essentially try to rebut everything that Glenn Greenwald says, and constantly maintaining their defense of the Democratic Party and Obama, who've sold us all out. It's really interesting. So I want to play a couple of...
The lie of omission is the biggest crime. I mean, the lie of omission is still a lie.
Right.
And so when you get a lot of half-truths, you're like, oh, that's true. Okay, yeah, that's true. But you don't know the full story. Well, that's just as dangerous. I mean, because that's how they function. That's how Fox News functions. That's how the corporate media in general functions. They don't give you the whole story. They give you half-truths. And it's a form of manipulation.
And when you only have half-truth, you don't know the whole story, and then your anchors seem like they don't really know what they're talking about when they interview people on the air. For example, listen to this.
Glenn, in that interview with the Washington Post, Snowden said his mission is already accomplished. So I wonder what your reaction was to that interview, and I wonder if you've spoken to him and when.
Yeah, I'm in regular contact with him. I've spoken with him since the interview, and I think the point that he was making was that as a whistleblower, his objective was not, as some people have said, to destroy NSA capabilities or anything like that, which he easily could have done if that were his intention, but simply to inform his fellow citizens about what their government was doing in the dark so that a serious debate around the world could be provoked. And I think he feels like that debate has been provoked, and he's quite gratified by the choice that he made.
I was actually trying to set up this clip, and I realized that I played the wrong clip just now. So this is the clip that I find highlighting the anchor's ignorance here, and I love how Glenn just picks up with it and runs with it. This is fantastic. Back to MSNBC doing their job.
Glenn, Snowden has said his mission is accomplished. President Obama is going to come out in January and announce, it seems like, some changes. If he does announce changes, will Snowden stop leaking information? Will that be it?
Snowden hasn't leaked any information for 6 months. He gave us all the documents that we have back in Hong Kong in June. And as journalists, we've been going through the documents that he furnished us back then in order to figure out which are the newsworthy stories and find the best and most accurate way to report them. So as a journalist, I'm not going to conceal newsworthy stories from the public. There are a lot more NSA stories that are extremely significant about what the NSA has been doing to the American people and to the privacy rights of people around the world that have not yet been reported, that absolutely will be reported. There's nothing President Obama or the United States government can do to force us to conceal newsworthy stories. How could we call ourselves journalists if we sat on newsworthy stories?
Woo! Amen. Okay, as a fellow broadcast journalism student myself who went to college for that, that's what my degree is in. How can you call yourself a journalist if you sit on newsworthy stories? Amen, Glenn Greenwald. But the first part of that was really interesting. Well, the anchor goes, well, if Obama's going to do something, Obama is going to hope and change, right? And if Obama hope and changes, is Edward Snowden going to stop leaking documents? Well, if you actually knew what was going on, you'd know that Edward Snowden isn't leaking documents. He gave everything in one lump sum to them in the beginning. And the Glenn Greenwalds, the guardians of the world, are leaking the newsworthy statements. So again,
the Washington Post as well.
Right. And so it's like here you have this, they don't even know what they're talking about, right?
That's the gotcha meat. That's the gotcha media.
Gotcha. But this right here, I say the best for last because I love doing that. This is the gotcha. I'll just play it. This is the best clip here.
The point is not so much about MSNBC and what happens here, but more that sometimes when you talk about Edward Snowden, you do defend him, and some people wonder if that crosses a line.
Sure, I do defend him, just like people on MSNBC defend President Obama and his officials and Democratic Party leaders 24 hours a day.
Not everyone on MSNBC
I don't make any bones
does
about
that 24 hours a day.
No, not everybody, but a lot of people on MSNBC do. And so, sure, I don't make any bones about the fact that I consider what Edward Snowden did to be quite heroic, just like I consider what Chelsea Manning did to be heroic, and Daniel Ellsberg, who's one of my political heroes. I, as a journalist, am very grateful when people sacrifice their own interests to come forward and bring transparency to the United States government. That, to me, is what journalism is about, and we need a lot of that in the United States. So I absolutely do defend what Edward Snowden does, and I don't pretend otherwise.
Oh, I love that.
Very nice.
So
that's like the my favorite quote that I recently learned was about a guy, I can't remember who said it, but he said, journalism is printing what someone else doesn't want printed. Everything else is just propaganda.
Yeah, to find out who rules over you, simply find out who you're not allowed to criticize.
Exactly.
Essentially, or something like that, right?
Yeah, both those quotes go together. Yeah, it's perfect.
I love, the anchor. Well, it's not really about what's going on here at MSNBC. It's about you, Glenn Greenwald. And why are you so defensive of Edward Snowden? Well, it's probably because people like you, MSNBC, the so-called liberal media, are demonizing the fellow for following his conscience and waking us all up to the fact that now we all have NSA GPS tracking devices in our pockets everywhere we go.
That's my favorite quote from, one of my favorite quotes anyway, from WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, where he says, he says, you have to start thinking of phones, not as phones, but as GPS tracking devices that make calls. His whole, if you ever hear Cornel West actually went to where Julian Assange is holed up there in London and interviewed him for like an hour and a half, I think, for the Smiley and West show. And it's just a remarkable interview because, first of all, Cornel West is interviewing somebody and not the other way around. And second of all, the way Julian Assange speaks, the language he uses is a far different terminology than you and I ever understand technology to be. You know what I mean? His understanding of technology and the way he explains things is just he uses different words. And that's part of shutting out the poison.
Yep.
Once you shut out the poison of the cant of popular culture, you're able to speak in your own language and not the language they give you. And that's the whole, as soon as you say, for example, the war on terror,
you've lost.
You're limited. Yeah, you're limited in your speech, and you're limited in your ability to create another narrative, to think outside the box, because you've just used the slogan that they've given you, and that's you've been pigeonholed. And so, part of shutting out the poison is reading alternative media and creating another narrative and understanding with your own words what is really happening, and not using the words that they give you.
Yeah, or I like what Abby says in the chat room. How come there's no conversations anymore about cell phones transmitting brain cancer, huh?
Oh, my God. We're all going to be... I can't remember whose study that came out a while back, but they said that cell phones are going to be like the cigarettes in the 50s.
Yeah.
Where, everyone knows cigarettes aren't bad for you, and now we're going to... Now, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, they're going to be like, wow, cell phones are killing everybody. Brain tumors for everybody.
That's a perfect segue into this cool story that I saw from ProjectCensored.org. Project Censored comes out every year with their top uncovered censored news stories. The real news that was censored out of the corporate media. The news that didn't make the news, the top 25 censored stories from 2013. And that is number 14 on their list. Essentially, wireless technology is a really a looming health crisis. Actually, for a couple minutes before we go to the break, I want to go through this list. It's a great list. And what bothers me personally is, here's a list from Project Censored of the top 25 news stories that were not covered in the mainstream media. And over the last year, Scott and I have talked about probably every single one of these stories.
It's frustrating when you talk to everybody.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm frustrated with my parents and other friends who sit down at night. It's a ritual. You sit down, you eat dinner, you watch corporate news, you watch ABC or NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams or whatever. And it's just a habit. You get up in the morning, you have your coffee, and you read your corporate paper. And yet, and I talk to people who demonize Edward Snowden and whose understanding of things is tangential at best. They don't really know the details. They just know this is bad. For example, and just to be, and they're very vague on things, but they have an opinion. Everyone's got an opinion. Because what? Opinions are like assholes, man. Everyone's got one, and they all stink.
Oh.
So because no one has any real facts. But you have to feel like you know something, and so you have an opinion about it. And anyway, when you talk to people who have an opinion and don't know what's going on, it's hard to break through that veneer to tell them that what they're understanding, that they misunderstand something, and that they really don't know what it is they're talking about. And immediately you ruin the conversation because you've embarrassed them. Mm-hmm. But to give people the other narrative is really important, and it's really an uncomfortable conversation to have with people when you're telling them, this is not true and this is not true. And by the way, yes, we're all going to die from Fukushima radiation, which is something.
And we've talked a lot about on this show.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, it's overwhelming and it's paralyzing, and it's hard to get people out of that rut to realize and live in the truth, and then empower them to do something about it. Yep. And so the next step is to build an infrastructure of resistance.
To actually create the alternative systems that we are asking people to jump to from the current status quo.
Well, that's what they say. Resistance works on two tracks. One, you build parallel systems to replace the dying systems, and two, you build resistance movements to fuck up the current system to bring about change. And so it's a two-track system, and right now we don't have either.
Damn it! So what actually were the top 25 censored news stories from the last year, according to Project Censored, the news that didn't actually make the news? I'm not going to read the whole list, but we'll do a couple of them here. Number 24, the widespread GMO contamination. Did Monsanto plant GMOs before the United States, the USDA approval? Remember that whole story? Oh, that's right, because no one talked about it. Yeah. Number 22, Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania law that gagged doctors to protect the big oil's proprietary secrets, essentially paying off the people to not talk about anything about fracking, right? Number 21, Monsanto and India's suicide economy. Did you know that Monsanto has a long history of contaminating and covering up in India, and other Monsanto covering up things are going on? Do you know about that? Probably not, because, these are uncovered stories that no one talks about. How about number 19, the power of peaceful revolution in Iceland? Remember, the Iceland actually jailed some of their banksters after privatizing their national banking sector. The private banksters borrowed billions of dollars, 10 times the size of Ireland's economy, created a huge economic bubble. It bursted, and then they actually threw some of those banksters in jail. How many people on Wall Street got to jail? I think one, but it wasn't even the actual dude. Anyways, the number 18, fracking our food supply. The effects of hydraulic fracking on the food and the environment are slowly emerging, but no one in the mainstream media is going to talk about it. Number 16, journalism under attack around the globe. Journalists are increasingly at risk of being killed or imprisoned for doing their job. Yes, we talk about it a lot, but not necessarily covered in the mainstream media. Have you heard of any of these stories? By the way, I'm curious. Have you, any of these, the top 25 censored news stories from Project Censored this year? What about the food riots? Number 15, the new normal food riots. Number 14, wireless technology, a looming health crisis, like we were just talking about with the cell phones. Number 13, a fifth of Americans go hungry. An August poll, Gallup poll, showed that 18.2% of Americans lacked sufficient money for needed food. Number 9, Icelanders vote to include commons in their constitution. Good on them. Number 7, merchants of death and nuclear weapons. Just a few of these. Number 6, billionaires raising wealth intensifies poverty and inequality. Hate groups and anti-government groups on the rise across the United States. Obama's war on whistleblowers, number 4. Number 3, the third most underreported real news story over the last year, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, threatens a regime of corporate global governance. And in the top 2, can you guess what the top 2? Richest global 1% hide trillions in tax havens, and the number 1 most underreported story of the corporate media of the last year is, drum roll, please, Chelsea Manning, a.k.a. Bradley Manning, and the failure of the corporate state. But hey, the TPP, Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning, and the wealth inequality is all pretty close. Pretty close top 3. And folks in the chat room say, wait a minute, I know about all these stories. I've heard about all these stories. Good on you for shutting out the poison and seeking the alternative truth-telling media. That's what it's all about. Hey, I've got a really cool example of how really pathetic the corporate media has become coming up right after this. I got to share with you. We'll have a laugh, and we'll get into a little bit of Chris Hedges next on the Nicole Sandler Show, RadioOrNot.com.
It's Nicole Sandler on RadioOrNot.com.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Come experience the next generation of progressive voices on Nicole Sandler's primetime lineup at RadioOrNot.com. Liberate yourself with filter-free radio every Monday night.
The Occupy movement has nationally altered the conversation. And that's where it begins. The national conversation can change itself into a new direction. And we need a new conversation. We need a new culture. We need to start the conversation.
Skepticism. You know, I chose that word skepticism not because it's related to cynicism. It's skepticism by definition means to question everything. You should always be skeptical, and you should always rely on the voices from below.
Tune in every weekday night to the primetime Radio or Not lineup at the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, RadioOrNot.com.
Hi, this is Kenny Pick from Turn Up the Night. Here are some of the hijinks you can expect from my show.
Also, news just recently came out about a 15-year-old girl, I think, over in the UK.
Yeah.
Who's only eating McNuggets, and this 15-year-old
get real sick.
Yeah, her tongue swelled up and she collapsed.
What's the technical medical term for eating nothing but chicken nuggets?
I think that would be suicide.
Turn Up the Night with Kenny Pick, streaming live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern at Radio or Not, Talk Radio 1, Progressive Blend Radio, and KennyPick.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to The Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money and politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
And welcome back. Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott of Filter Free Radio, in for Nicole Sandler live this morning. Nicole will be in for Randy Rhoads Nationwide at 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, coming up in just a couple hours. RandyRhoads.com. We're going to be in today. I believe we're going to be in tomorrow for New Year's Eve. At least I will be for Nicole. I'll speak for myself. And then Nicole is back in her normal time slot and doing Randy Rhoads. We're just trying to help out a little bit over the holiday hump here, I suppose. And so if I may for just a second, please check out our website, filterfreeradio.com. Everything on the website is free. We don't charge you for anything. All of our video podcast, every episode we've ever done, everything we've ever talked about, every news thing. It's all free. It's all on the website. Go check it out. It's super cool. And I promise you, I will never do a story about cats. Unless the cats are organizing some sort of massive nationwide protest, then I'll do it. So there you go. We were going to touch base with Nicole Bell of Crooks and Liars this morning for the Fools on the Hill segment. I have not heard from Nicole Bell, so I hope she's not standing by expecting a phone call from me. I've got no email. Normally we touch base before the show. You don't need to hear this. So I'm just going to move forward and actually go to this story that I found from Nicole Bell's blog at crooksandliars.com. I thought this was kind of interesting. And of course, it is the holidays, so folks do deserve a nice break once in a while. And that's why we're in, you can tell it's the holiday season because all the fill-in hosts are getting their crack at the mic, right?
Everybody's on vacation but us.
That's right. Nicole Bell had an interesting article at crooksandliars.com. I try to read what she's up to get an idea what we're talking about before she comes on for the Fools on the Hill segment. I think Nicole isn't here with us. I haven't heard from her. I got no email or anything. So, but she had Nicole Bell put a really cool article up at crooksandliars.com, and it was titled "Words to the Effect of Laughing at the Death of Journalism," sort of. But I don't have cable. I've never had cable my whole life, and I don't have cable. I don't have satellite, DirecTV, all that other jazz. I mean, I get the basic antenna free TV, right? So I don't get to watch the Conan O'Brien anymore, for example, because he's on like TNT or TNN or whatever. Anyways, I used to watch Conan O'Brien when he was on the networks. I like Conan O'Brien, and I had no idea that he's been doing this new kind of media bit, right? This is just how pathetic the corporate media has become. How, and Scott and I spent a lot of time talking about how bad it is and talking about how really differentiating us from that. But I wanted to share an example with you of just really how bad is it. So you can actually hear for yourself how pathetic the corporate media has become. And bless Nicole Bell for posting this, and bless Conan O'Brien for doing this on his program. I want to share a couple clips from Conan O'Brien. He gets a hold of these local news stories, and this is the local news. And most people think this is like, it's what you would think of as the news when you turn on the TV at night, and you watch, Channel 2 or Channel 6 or Channel 8 or 7 or 9, the local newscast. This is all different local news anchors in the mainstream media, so-called mainstream media, literally reading the same exact script. And this is not edited. These are all completely different people. It's not like the same voice. They took and tweaked the same voice over and over and over again. If you actually go watch the video, you can see all the different anchors reading the same script. And I thought this was really interesting. Let me play a taste of this for you.
News stations around the country have picked up on this story, and each one is putting its own unique spin on it.
Talk show host Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be able to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on his late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Didn't he just say
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Okay, you get the idea, right? How funny is that? And of course you're thinking, well, yeah, I know the mainstream media is bad, but did you actually realize that You know, the 2 or 3 networks that exist, you know, ABC sends out the same script to every frickin' ABC affiliate, and they all run with it. You know, it's kind of like that deja vu feeling where, don't you feel like you keep hearing the same shit over and over again from the liars on the corporate media? You feel like you keep hearing the same shit over and over again. And I'm so happy that Conan O'Brien has actually taken the time to put it all together and say, yeah, you really are hearing the same shit over and 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 over again. Same script. Here's another example.
A lot of people think the big news stories today are the snowstorm that's hitting the Midwest or the looming federal budget cuts. But judging by local news, there's apparently an even bigger story that's sweeping the nation right now. Check it out.
Well, if you filled up your gas tank lately, then you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You get the point?
Need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
I think you get the idea.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are back on the rise.
And you don't need me to tell you that you keep hearing the same shit over and over again.
You just cut it off and say, you don't need us.
You don't need us. You don't need us. You don't need us. You don't need us. That's great, dude. That's a great idea.
Cut that whole segment down. Yeah, that's the death of the liberal class. It's the death of media and the death of journalism. I mean, totalitarian systems make war on independent and critical thought. They make war on the arts. And you know what they really seek to crush is truth, beauty, and critical thinking and creativity. And so we are in a society now that is so scripted. You know, it's so mundane and it's the same for everybody, and it's universal, and everybody has an iPhone, and everyone listens to the same shit, and blah blah blah. It's it's how you create obedient workers, and that's how you crush creative thinking, and it's how you stifle any kind of resistance, because everyone just falls in line and follows the same script. And you know, it's, for me, I remember, just as a side note, one of the things that really turned my opinion politically is Chris Hedges' death of the liberal class, because up until that point I consider myself a proud liberal, a progressive, a liberal, whatever. You know, I don't like labels, but at that point, this is circa 2008, 2009, or whatever. After Obama was elected, and I was like, yeah, we helped elect Obama. I'm a proud liberal, take that term back, make it a good term again. And then I read his death of the liberal class, and I thought, oh man,
this book right here, this one. I'm holding. You're probably not watching. I'm holding up the book for the camera.
No, my computer would crash if I had a video stream going. But yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole point. Is that, and his lecture, you can watch his lectures on YouTube about it. It's fantastic, because he itemizes the 5 pillars of liberal establishment are the church, education, the arts, journalism, and the labor unions, and they're all dead. And they've all been corporatized, and this is just what you just showed us as one example of the corporatization of our liberal media, our so-called liberal media, our liberal establishments. The 5th pillar, the 4th column, or the 5th estate was what journalism used to be. It used to be a check and balance on power, and now it's owned. It is part of the power establishment. So it's just propaganda at this point.
One more of these, just to really hammer it home, because I think someone out there didn't get it. Someone didn't hear it. Someone actually keeps going back to the same old crap, not realizing it's the same old crap repackaged. And as much as I love cupcakes, you can't put frosting on a turd and call it a cupcake. It's still going to taste like shit. Here, check this one out. This is funny.
Oh. Announced he's expecting another child, and I was checking out the local news. Local news found a really unique way to tell the story.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
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 Mike Myers
says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says,
Yeah, baby. Did I say that right?
Yeah, say it right.
So just in case if you ever tune into our program, Filter Free Radio, and we're talking about something you've never heard anyone else talk about before, just keep what I just played for you in mind, because it's getting pretty pathetic. And as I always do, or try to do, I've saved the best for last. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I've got 4 Chris Hedges clips to play, and I think we've got time to do all of them. So the last time we filled in for Nicole Sandler, we were going through a fantastic speech Chris Hedges gave at the Moravian College titled The Myth of Human Progress and the Collapse of Complex Societies. We titled that program, we shortened the title to The Myth to the Myth of Human or what do we call it? The Collapse of Human Progress, I think is what we titled it.
The Collapse of Human Progress, yeah.
And so I just want to play a little bit from Chris Hedges. Someone in the chat room says Chris Hedges is a god. I think, and Chris Hedges is someone who came out of the church. He was grew up in a very religious upbringing. Was going to be an ordained. Went to, where did he go to college? Oh, it's a very church heavy background, right? And then
he's a Harvard Divinity student,
right?
He graduated from Harvard Divinity School and didn't go on to become a minister. He was completely distraught after that experience.
Well, he had a lot of issues with the established church, and
his father's a Presbyterian minister too. Yeah, the church establishment. I mean, the hierarchies and the wealth that flows upward. In these hierarchies. I mean, hierarchies by the very nature, hierarchies are fundamentally anti-democratic, and so the church. At that point, I think he realized that the church itself was corrupt, and he moved on. He became a journalist of all things.
Right. Let me play a couple of these clips. And this earlier we were talking about violence and nonviolence. This is a real short clip on nonviolent rebellion. Oh. I better have the darn thing ready, shouldn't I?
Rebellion is a moral imperative. It is to be carried out regardless of the possibilities of success. It is not for the practical or the timid. It is an act that is performed in the end because in times of despair and suffering, it affirms life.
And that's exactly where we are. We are in times of despair. We are in times of feeling like the little David that cannot do anything against the Goliath. And we really have to empower ourselves and to just get over it. Rebellion is a moral imperative. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to hear on Media Matters.
I do like that term. It's really true. I mean, the only and he goes, I don't know if you have that in a clip too, where he says I think it's a Hannah Arendt quote, where it's the only morally reliable position is revolt. And the only morally reliable position is not those who say this is wrong or this should not be done, but those who say I can't.
Right. I don't have that one ready, but I've got other ones ready, like this one, Scott, that talks about how and this is kind of my whole point, and going back to the beginning of the show, talking about reflecting on our growth and reflecting on the last year, and how I know that we aren't doing enough. And let me be the first to say, yeah, I'm guilty. I know I don't do enough. And the reason that we feel empty, we feel hopeless, we feel this disparity is because we are not doing enough. We are not fulfilling our potential. And this is exactly what Chris Hedges is talking about.
We can surmount despair, not by ignoring reality, but by responding radically to it. And this includes acts of civil disobedience, including jail time. In these acts, we become fully human.
Every time that I've ever covered a protest or demonstration, and we come back and done a show about it, I can't tell you how motivated I become after participating. It's like we don't do anything and we get despair and we look at what's going on and disparity. But then if we go get active, we go participate, we start empowering ourselves, we start making the small changes in our lives that we have control over, it begins to shift. It begins to change. And then we become the change we're seeking. And then those around us observe our changes, and then they want to change themselves. It's like the Dick Gregory quote that Tom Hartman says all the time. If you have something really good, you don't have to force it on people. They'll steal it from you. Anyways, just a thought. I got 2 more clips. We got 10 minutes. And everyone in the chat room right now is really digging the Chris Hedges. And I dig it. Noam Chomsky, Chris Hedges, Howard Zinn, Cornel West. I can't...
Slavoj Žižek.
I cannot say that guy's name.
Slavoj Žižek.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, he has a movie. There's a documentary by him called Žižek, and he's got tons of... his famous book is Living in the End Times, and he has a huge lecture. It's on. If you look at our video blog on filterfreeradio.com, it's posted on there, and it's a 90-minute lecture. It's on YouTube, and man, is it heavy! Whew, God,
I love what Abby says in the chat room. Every protest I've ever participated in gives me a sense of power. Yes, it is. I think it's incumbent upon those people who have actually participated in the past, the older generations. Pardon my, calling out your age, the young spring chicken here. I really think it's imperative for the older people who have experienced the difference before to share those experiences with us, because I am not familiar with a world pre 9/11. I'm not familiar, well, I am a little bit, but not really familiar with the world pre-NSA, But you are, and you might be, and your stories of participation and empowering really would make a difference to a lot of those of us who have no idea. We have no conception. Amy Goodman's a good one to add to the list as well. Thank you, Liberta, in the chat room. Back to, I got 2 more clips here. These are the last 2 clips. Chris Hedges on the myth of human progress, the collapse of complex societies. The whole speech is about an hour, and the whole thing in its entirety is posted on our website at filterfreeradio.com. If you're so inclined, I strongly suggest you check it out. Here's a minute or so near the end of his speech that is just fantastic.
The degradation of education into vocational training for the corporate state, the destructions of the humanities, arts, and journalism, the hijacking of these disciplines by corporate sponsors severs the population from understanding, self-actualization, and transcendence. In aesthetic terms, the corporate state seeks to crush beauty, truth, and imagination, and this is the war waged by all totalitarian systems. The role of the artist, then, precisely, is to illuminate that darkness, blaze roads through the vast forest, James Baldwin wrote, so that we will not, in all our doing, lose sight of its purpose, which is, after all, to make the world a more humane dwelling place. Ultimately, the artist and the revolutionary function as they function and pay whatever dues they must pay behind it, because they are both possessed by a vision, that they do not so much follow this vision as find themselves driven by it, Baldwin wrote. Otherwise, they could never endure, much less embrace, the lives they are compelled to lead.
I'm typing here in the chat room. Scott and I, one of the most memorable moments of my entire life was when Scott and I went and watched Dr. Cornel West give his keynote address at George Washington University in D.C. one evening. I'll never forget that night as long as I live. And once...
Yeah, he spoke for an hour and 20 minutes with no notes.
With no notes. With no scripts. With no nothing. Just his brain. And I tell you, once you sit through an hour-long Cornel West keynote, you no longer give a shit about anything MSNBC's talking about, because you know it's nothing but shit. And a waste of time. And a waste of energy. Because we're not dealing in the concrete. They're not dealing in the reality. Obamacare is fantastic. Look at how great the Obamacare healthcare reform has been. What reform?
It's insurance. It's not healthcare. It's insurance. That's the big lie.
Motherfuckers. Anyways, last clip, and then Scott, I want you to riff on this. This is the very end of his speech, of this particular speech, the last minute or so of this. And I love this. I normally would not play a clip this long. It's about 1:30, but it's so good and so concise, and there's so much into it. Here you go.
I do not know if we can build a better society. I do not even know if we will survive as a species. But I know these corporate forces have us by the throat, and they have my children by the throat. I do not fight fascists because I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascists. And this is a fight which, in the face of the overwhelming forces arrayed against us, requires us to embrace sublime madness, to find in acts of rebellion the embers of life, an intrinsic meaning that lies outside the certainty of success. We must at once grasp our reality and then refuse to allow reality to paralyze us. We must make an absurd leap of faith. We must believe, despite the empirical evidence around us, that the good always draws to it the good. We do not know where acts of goodness go. The Buddhists call it karma. But in these acts, we make visible a better world. It is time for our own mutiny, for the overthrow of our own Ahabs, for the redirecting of our ship away from certain death back towards life. No matter how bleak things get, we always have a choice in life. We can choose to be rebels or slaves, and that choice is one the corporate state is powerless to take from us. And to rebel, even if we fail, is to succeed. We must become a threat to the security and surveillance state and its corporate overlords, and we cannot become a threat if we do not engage in actions that actively obstruct power.
And that's about it. We must become a threat, and we cannot become a threat unless we all wake the F up. Scott, man.
Can you play that last sentence again? Can you rewind far enough to do that?
Rewind?
Threat to the security and surveillance state and its corporate overlords, and we cannot become a threat if we do not engage in actions that actively obstruct power.
We have to actively obstruct power.
Obstruct power. That's what I was trying to get across earlier, far less articulately, if that's even a word. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole notion of being passive and watching television versus being out in the streets and protesting. I mean, the whole, what is it, what's his name says, it's the last liberal president we ever had was Richard Nixon. Not because he was a liberal, but because he passed the Clean Water Act, the EPA, the Mine and Safety Act, and all these. Because people were protesting in the streets out in front of the White House, and he was scared to death, and so he did what the people wanted, and that's how that works, and that's exactly where you want them. You want them to be scared of a revolt. You want them to be scared of a revolution. You want them to be afraid that if they don't do the will of the people, God, the will of the people. When have you ever heard that term in the mainstream media?
I think they wrote it in some sort of document back in like the 1770s something, but it's been a while.
But if you don't, I mean, that's the whole thing. If they don't, you want them to be so afraid that they don't do the will of the people that bad things will happen to them. Not to threaten violence, but to be actually in the streets and shutting down the system. That's why I love the closing that we play on our show, and you'll hear it in a minute from Mario Savio, where you have to obstruct, you have to shut down these systems, because these systems exist because we give them our money.
Yep.
We participate in them, and you have to not participate. It's hard, and it's not to say you can unparticipate in all of them, but you can find little mechanisms to avoid them. I mean, be it shopping at an alternative location, not buying corporate brands, not using less gas, or for me, I like to give my money to Citgo because I know Citgo's owned by Venezuela instead of Shell Oil or BP or Exxon or whatever. I mean, but the little things you can do to resist, and it's just a matter of all of us coming together and galvanizing a movement around shutting down this system of power. And eventually, it's going to come to a point where, with climate change, with the rapid chaos in the atmosphere and things, that it's going to be inevitable. I mean, with droughts and suffering and mass migrations away from the desert. I mean, let's face it, people aren't going to be living in Las Vegas much longer. right? I mean, you can't live in a desert in the middle of a drought, especially when people on the West Coast and East Coast are reliant on the same water. And so that's just one small example of when systems collapse, and they will collapse. And that's part of the collapse of complex societies.
Yep.
And that's one of the things Hedges points out in his speech earlier on, if you listen to it, where he says, we've created societies of such complexity that we do not know how to do anything else but feed that system and maintain a system that is killing us. We have to stop maintaining this system that is killing us. In literal and biblical terms, these are systems of death. The empire, we are an empire. All our money, I mean, if you see read the austerity budget, there's no cuts for the military. In fact, there's expansion of military. Well, $100,000, $1 million bombs to be dropped on goat herders in Pakistan does not enrich the lives of any American.
No.
And so
I can't wait for the day when the military has to hold a bake sale to raise funds for their new drones. That would be cool.
Yeah, I would love to see the military funding be based on crowdsourcing. Everyone, hey, don't donate to the military, otherwise we can't fight your war.
Hey, there's a long precedent of people who have disagreed with what the government is doing and have demonstrated so by protesting. The first thing that I'm thinking of is Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I'm thinking of it. Henry David Thoreau, when he spent a few days in jail for not paying his taxes because he was in disagreement with the illegal wars that the United States was engaging with in Mexico at the time. On that note, we are totally out of time for the show. We got to wrap it up. But, I love the conversation that's going on in the chat room at radioornot.com.
I'd like to thank everybody in the chat room for participating.
Thank all of you. Absolutely. I love it. Get out there. Continue to participate in activism and continue to confront authorities at all levels. And if you're not up to... if you're not up to the courageous level of confrontation of authority yet, well, at least question the authorities, right? So there you go. Big thanks to Nicole Sandler, the one, the only Nicole Sandler of the Nicole Sandler Show, for the opportunity, the honor, and the privilege of filling in for you. Big thanks to everyone who syndicates the program, the folks at SoFlo Radio, Talk Radio 1, Stitcher, all the above. Big thanks to the folks who do the music production for the program, everyone in the chat room. I got to thank my brother from another mother, Mr. Skeptical Scott, in the house for keeping us honest. You the man. I love you, bro. And we'll be back tomorrow again, one more time, in for Nicole, helping out on the holidays. Nicole is coming up live 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, randyrhodes.com. We'll see you soon.
Filter Free Radio.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. So give me something to believe, 'cause I am living just to believe, and I need something more to keep on breathing for. So give me something to believe.
The revolution will be broadcast
Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. Filter Free Radio.